should go by pretty quickly. A lot of information to get through in the next few hours. So at this point, I think I'm going to turn it over to Joe. Rob? Great.
Okay, as Shawn just mentioned, we're going to be covering a couple different reporting tools. One's the APPA FPI, Facilities Performance Measures. This is where the majority of the information in the survey was conducted, and most of the analysis and most of what we're going over today will be out of the FPI, and a small portion of it will be coming out of the NACUBO reports, which it only covers about, I think, 8 different metrics. As we go through the different reports, you'll see sort of a blend between the NACUBO and the FPI because we've entered in both of them, but the majority of it will be coming out of this FPI indicator. And that's what as we go through, that's what we'll be looking at. The NACUBO, these are the sort of metrics that it covers, and it's geared towards, I guess it's only 5 simple metrics, BTUs, kilowatts, water, waste, and carbon footprint. So most of them, we've been doing this for the past 3 years. And so we're just getting to the point now to where we can start looking at trending within those metrics, whereas before it was just like a single year snapshot. So I think as we continue to use the NACUBO metrics and become definitely more valuable with sustainability efforts that we have in the system, we'll be able to look at trending and market that and compare that with some of the other metrics that we're capturing on a system-wide basis.
Let me chime in a little bit about the differences between APPA FPI and the NACUBO. And the FPI has been around for about 12 years, and there was before that there was the strategic assessment model done by APPA, and the FPI has morphed from that and continued to grow and got more comprehensive, and the data improved over that period of time. The NACUBO is really somewhat of a subset of the FPI, and as Joe mentioned, the questionnaire for the NACUBO report is only about 8 questions, 8 or 12 questions. So it's 10,000 foot level. It's the type of stuff that your vice presidents are looking at or having access to. Cabo's meeting here soon, next couple of days or weeks or a bit soon, but in their meetings, this information is going to be coming up. So it's really a great idea for you to be familiar with particularly the NACUBO report in advance of your vice presidents asking you questions in this regard, and understanding how the information is calculated and what it really means in relationship to your operation. So some nuances between the NACUBO report and the FPI report. The FPI report, we strongly suggest to only utilize your general fund or academic space. And in relationship to that, the square footage, as well as the staffing that supports that square footage, and the budgets that support that square footage. So we ask you to remove your chargeback activities and your non-state or non-general fund or non-academic space when talking about the FPI. When we talk about NACUBO, it's as we said, it's a 10,000 foot level perspective, and so our recommendation is, and being that some campuses aren't in a position to separate their utility consumptions, their natural gas, their heating, hot water, or chilled water, their even electricity in some cases. And it's also a bigger picture perspective. So where the FPI is more about operations of your general fund space, the NACUBO is about the entire portfolio of the campus. And as such, it looks at all your square footage, all of your acreage, all of your consumption of water, gas, and generation of carbon footprint and such. So these numbers are very high level and somewhat different from the NACUBO or from the FPI. So it's important to know the distinction, and particularly when you're doing the inputs of the survey. And so as you become more and more familiar with it, the surveys become easier, it becomes more understandable, and the outputs are easier for you to explain under pressure at the last minute, because usually that's when you're asked to be knowledgeable about these things. So anyway, Joe, sorry.
Okay, so we're talking about some of the benefits of going through the survey, providing essential information to you as a director or as an organization. Talk about the type of space, understanding the type of space that you're managing and how that's being serviced by different components and people on your campus. We'll look at how efficient your facilities is operating, so you can compare that to the other institutions outside of the CSU, as well as cohort campuses within the CSU, looking at staffing levels and that kind of thing. And then obviously comparing it to your peers. And then we look for opportunities for improvement. So as we look at some of this data that comes in, some of it there's valid reasons for why you may have different data points than some of your cohort campuses, but there might be opportunities where you can point to areas where maybe you're not performing as well as you may have an opportunity. So you can point to where there's areas within your organization that you need to shore up. And then in comparison to that, there's also going to be opportunities for you to point to outstanding work, to where you're a best practice within the CSU system, or CSU as a whole is outstanding within all the cohorts of campuses nationwide. So it's information that you have that you can point to for improvement, and also information that you have you can point to where you're doing a really good job in comparison to the other campuses. Rob, you want to cover this one?
Oh, okay. Some of the main points we're going to talk about are your staffing levels, of course, and and this is in relationship to the FBI, and it's the focus on the money is about your annual facilities operating expenditures. So it's removing things like your deferred maintenance budget and such. It's talking about day-to-day operations, your funding for the use of the general fund for maintaining these facilities. So with that, so oftentimes the input of the surveys, you have to go back and focus on that. And if you've got half a dozen chargeback employees, well, that's really not your annual facilities operating expenditures. That's a chargeback fund or activity. So those dollars and those positions should be removed to not make your operating budget look different from what it actually is. Current replacement value, we spent a good deal of time on refining this number. It's so this number is provided to the campuses based on the methodology recommended by APPA. We try to transpose that number across different softwares and activities, including the facilities condition analysis and the sightline software and such, that we have a consistent number for what our CRV is. CRV, again, is current replacement value. The FCA might call it FRC, facilities replacement cost, but it's the same thing. And it's used as a part of ratios for determining funding per your CRV and such. So if you look at that number and say, we can't rebuild our campus for $1.2 billion, probably not. But what the number is a consistent number in relationship to the rest of the universities who have participated in the CSU and across the nation. So the most important thing is a consistency in the development of the CRV, and not so much that you can actually rebuild your campus for the number that spits out in terms of your campus CRV. So we continue to work with that and refine it, but again, we provide that as a consistent number from the through Joe's and Teresa's and space efforts to give you a single number from which we recommend you to input. You have the opportunity to input whatever number you'd like when your own survey implementation, but again, we have several recommended numbers to use, and this is one of them.
So let me expand on that a little bit, how that's changed over the last couple of years. We knew that the CRV numbers were low several years back, and so we actually, over the last 2 years, developed a different methodology for calculating the CRV using the facilities planning. Tracy, help me with the name of the the metrics on the costs for construction, the construction costs for CSU.
There's so many different numbers we
We just told her to hit a microphone.
Yeah, they go straight to, you know, their insurance group and go, how much are we insuring the campus for? But that's not really the replacement value. And then the question becomes, how do we differentiate? So when we put together a 2-7, which is the funding mechanism, right, for a new building, as you know, you've got, are we talking about current replacement value just based on the direct construction costs? Or are we talking about current replacement value based on what the 2-7 would say it would cost for us to replace that building? And I think that there's a very clear distinction between the two, and we need to understand that. And I don't think that the facility on our facility condition audits that the replacement value reflects what the true cost would be to the system to replace that building. It's reflecting the value of the direct construction of that building. Yeah,
and that's exactly right. And so what we've done over the last couple of years is instead of using the old Pacific Partners or now Sightlines CRV number that was generated through that system, we've come up with a different methodology using the actual construction costs related to the way planning would plan a building. And we've provided that back to campuses over the last couple of years. And what that's actually done is we've seen a jump in the cost of the CRV. So we think we're probably still not exactly on the number we need to be, but we're moving in the right direction. We're getting that better and more refined. So if you look back historically over what your CRV for your campus has been, you may see a jump a couple of years ago in comparison to what it had been previously.
There's a question from Nathaniel. Do you have a microphone?
Yeah.
Quick question. Sightline would not have the latest CRV. That's not what we'll be using, correct?
That's correct.
The number to use in this report would be the number provided by the 2-7.
Well, no, not the 2-7. We actually went campus by campus and generated what your CRV is.
Yeah.
So we provided that back out to everybody this time. There is some core data that is provided by the Chancellor's office every year for the data input for FPI, and that's one of the metrics that we've started providing.
This is normally in mid-November when the survey is open for the new year, and that's when we provide this information.
Thank you.
Shawn, a quick question, just out of curiosity, because you know this was an important piece that we talked about, and it affects you know a whole bunch of things. But my question is, have we had discussions with APPA to determine how they interpret that number, and how does it compare? And my reason for that is we have a really good cohort within the CSU that we're looking at. But often when we generate these reports, or when I get a new vice president or a new person that's out of state, they suffer from California sticker shock at what those prices are. And so it would be good to know if we're comparing apples to oranges with the way we define the CRV versus the way APPA defines it. Because if they came from a previous institution that only defined it as the direct construction cost, because that's the way APPA defines it, then that's an education piece that we need to do with that new person. And I believe that we're doing it the right way.
Yeah, and what we did was we went back to the APPA definition for how CRV is calculated. And that was the foundation where we started to rebuild this new methodology. And so we're combining that with our construction costs related to planning efforts, and using the definitions from APPA to reform how the CRV is calculated now. Yep.
And as a side note, I'm working on a nationwide committee through APPA and ANSI and Construction Specifications Institute to develop TCO 1000, an ANSI standard for total cost of ownership 1000. And we're talking specifically about the value of the data, the integrity of the data, and CRV is definitely in that conversation to make it a more universal, understandable, and accurate to the extent possible number. So anyway, it's a work in progress. It's getting better. And we're going to talk as we move along these slides about in how it's utilized or how it can be utilized for your use to understand your budgets and such in relationship to your campus. So, and the second and third lines up there are one of the metrics that we'll be looking at, and it's the annual facilities operating expenditures, which we acronym as AFOE, in relationship to the CRV. So AFOE divided by the CRV will give you a percentage of what your budget is in relationship to the CRV. That's one of the ways you can look at it, and you can look at that number in comparison to 400 institutions across the country or 23 in the CSU. So, but we will get to that.
And that's one of the many ways that in FPI, what we call normalized data, right? So it's actually comparable against institutions, because not everybody's annual facilities operating expense is the same, and not everybody's current replacement value is the same. So how do you come up with a number that's actually comparable? So that's where these numbers become important on how they're calculated, so that we're actually doing apples to apples comparisons. And so when you divide the AFOE by the CRV, you come up with a percentage that is an equivalent percentage across all institutions. So if your AFOE per CRV is 4 or 5%, it is comparable to another institution's similar percentage. And we'll look at how that works as we get deeper into these reports today.
And I believe those numbers are probably going to look in the average of under 2, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2. But on the other hand, if we look down at the AFOE in relationship to the gross institutional expenditure in the bottom, we're going to look at percentages in the neighborhood of 5 to 6, and somewhere in those ranges, 3 or 4% up and down along that way. And those are probably a little more easy to digest for some folks rather than the CRV. But anyway, moving along, the gross square footage. This is information also provided to the CSU campuses through some really extensive work by our space database manager, Teresa Tiss. And so space is a really interesting thing. It depends who you're asking, when, and where. So we talk about SQFD4 or whatever it is, which is your GSF. And it's your general fund space database. And we even break it down by category. If you want to get into the detailed reports and see how much research space, how much library space, how much academic or classroom space or whatever, we'll break it down into categories, and you can go into a deeper level of inputs so that you can get the outputs. And it's somewhat interesting to have that kind of information in your hip pocket as well. You never know when it can help you out in a situation. So student FTE, pretty easy, also provided to you. And the gross institutional expenditures, APPA calls it, we like to call it the annual budget. Normalize it within our CSU system for the annual budget, as influxes of donations and such really have little to do with your operating expense and the expenditures during a fiscal year. So we've been lobbying APPA to change that to annual budget. With to date, no success on that. But as I say, we recommend and we actually provide the annual budget number for your campus from which to make that. This is general fund again. So general fund to general fund.
So yeah, if you look at those data points, one of the things that I realized when I first started looking at this APPA survey tool was that we're really looking at cross-referencing this data, and it's basically looking at physical assets that we have, buildings, the grounds, and the land that we occupy and the value associated with that. The people that occupy that space are students and faculty, and then people that service that space, all the staff that are associated with servicing that, and then the cost associated with that whole operation. So the data points are all broken into making up the physical makeup and the people that occupy it and how much it costs to actually run what we do. And then the reports that come out of that are sort of cross-referencing those data points.
And for those of you who have done this for years and years, a lot of this background data that we're giving is old hack to you. You understand it, you know it. But a lot of times during these trainings, we kind of go back to basics, because every year we have a new set of folks who are looking at this data for the first time. So you'll have to, excuse us if a lot of the stuff we talk about is rudimentary and things that you've already been trained on in the past or understand. But just to understand across the system, every year we have an influx of new folks who are doing this FPI training and learning how to do these reports for the first time. So some of it might be redundant for many of you who've been doing it for a while, but we'll hopefully add additional information annually that actually adds to your knowledge base.
Okay, and the broad categories from which we break this information, these budgets and staffing down into are the administrative, the custodial, grounds and landscaping, the maintenance, which usually we equate in the CSU to the Unit 6 trades groups, and we have our energy and purchased utilities groups, which is both the commodity and the positions that belong, that are funded out of that utility. Oftentimes it's the energy manager, sometimes the control specialist or two. And so sometimes these can trigger an idea, geez, this campus has 6 people that are funded out of energy. Interesting. So I mean, you can look at that and do some comparisons and give you some ideas, maybe approach your campus VP of maybe some positions might be able to equate to the energy fund rather than the operations fund. Let me finish this and we'll get a question from Jason. Then we have the construction and architect engineer, which is one of the tougher group of cats to herd. We've been trying to do that. Facilities folks do a much better job in terms of accountability for their daily activities. And it's somewhat easier to correlate the general fund activities of the facilities folks versus the architects and engineers folks. But we're getting there. We think it's really important that we know what our soft costs are in relationship to actual construction costs, for instance, and other activities. We're taking baby steps towards that, and we're making some progress. And anyway, we have other facilities positions, and you got to pay attention not to overload your administrative budget, for instance, in putting people like warehouse workers into it, administration. So there's specific instructions when we do this survey of where to put positions like warehousing. And then we have other non-facilities folks. Some of you might be running the mailroom, property, health and safety and such. And you can put those folks into these categories which will not influence your AFOE. So we'll take a question from Jason Northridge.
Thanks, and I might be jumping ahead here, and I apologize if that's the case, but are we going to go into some of the strategies and specifics for this? Because as we were looking at some of our numbers, our trades seems unusually high compared to other campuses, and that might be a result of the earthquake and some staffing that happened. But our energy positions are significantly lower. So we're trying to figure out, do we have some folks that, like, should a BSE be in energy and that kind of stuff? So we're going to be talking about that later. Otherwise.
Yes. Yeah, we will. We're going to be showing some, we'll be taking the raw data and putting it in, well, actually not, we won't be putting it, we'll be taking some screenshots out of the APPA report and even going live if we have time later to answer specific questions and showing you how to work through the system and such. But looking at the graphs, and sometimes some things are going to stick out of why is this there, and we have some theories of why that we'll get into.
And if we don't answer a question today for those online or in the room that is specific to your campus, and you have some questions on how your benchmark data may vary from other peer institutions, this is the brain trust to come back with those questions, right? Shoot us an email, talk to us about what your concern is. We can do a deep dive into your data and help you analyze and understand where there might be some tweaks or nuances that are different on your campus than in other places. So we're happy to help you work out any of those questions that you might have today or after the training.
And it is depending on which group is asking when and why, if it's your budget committee, or if it's your vice president, or if it's an angry union member demanding more staff or whatever, we can give you some tools from which to work and help to defuse situations and put things within context and help to answer things in more of an analytical way and less emotional, and it can be really beneficial. We can if you really want to delve into it, we can do a site visit to your campus and work through some of this stuff and help to demonstrate how these things can really be effective for your situation at hand.
Okay, I'm just going to talk. We've got a couple slides that are going to show you the front end of the web page for those that are unfamiliar with it. This PowerPoint will be available to everyone. So we just put these slides in here to help you with navigation. APPA changed their website just recently. They were going through a reconfiguration of it, which was sort of poor timing with us developing the APPA reports, because we have to coordinate their updated their website along with updating the new reports from the FPI. But that's all solidified now. But we got a couple slides here to show you how to get in. The URLs at the top of the page. There's a login pointing over on the right side, which will bring you to your login. If you need help with your login information, we can help you, for those of you who don't have it. To get to the APPA or to the FPI portion of it, it's changed a little bit. So you basically go under My APPA after logging in, and then click on My Research. So that's how you get to the both the survey and the report section for the FPI. And then this screen looks the same as it always has. And right now, the reporting tool, Rob and I, we got access to a beta version of it. So the reports that you see today will be out of the beta version, but it's not officially released other than the beta version for the report access. Do you know when that's going to be?
I understand it's not going to be for another 4 or 5 weeks. And yes.
Right.
So, and I believe everybody who's got a login has access to the beta data also. And with they've gone through, and it's been challenging. They have given us some license to make some adjustments if you see something way out of line, even at this late date. This database is supposed to close in December 15th. Normally have a few stragglers, we end up getting it extended until the mid-January level. So to have an opportunity to make some adjustments at this late date, we could probably make that happen. If you see something that's, after you gain this information today and you say, geez, this really doesn't align with what our reality is, and we'd like to change this gross square foot number or our staffing number or whatever else it is, we would probably have that opportunity.
Okay. So I'm going to run through, and once you get logged into the FBI, there's a number of screens along the top pull-down bar that will navigate you to different sections that help you make adjustments to the application or to go in and view reports, et cetera. So the first one on the left is the report settings. And the report settings will allow you to adjust how the reports look. So it's where you go in and choose the institutions that you want to compare with your data, whether it's all the CSU campuses, or you can pick other campuses out of the 450 campuses that participate in the survey nationwide. You can then choose from the executive level dashboards, which is another section, up to 3 different institutions that you're going to compare yourself against. And then there's summary options within the settings that'll adjust the reports group and summarize data. And then the other one that we use is there's the main one that I often go back in and use, the years that you're comparing it. So you can compare it up to 5 years in the past. A lot of times it's either just the current data. Sometimes you want to see what the trending of how that data's been adjusted. So that's all within the report setting. So if you see something on the report that you want to maybe look a little bit different, summarize different, compare it with different institutions, or adjust the years, that's where you handle that within the FBI.
So the graphs get a little busy if you have a lot of if you're looking at all 23 campuses with a 5-year trend on custodial funding or your facilities budget in relationship to the university budget. Those graphs are awfully busy. So you may want to look at just your campus and how are we doing over the last 5 years, or it doesn't have to be 5 consecutive years. If you've participated since 2005, you could look at every third year or something and see what your funding level is, how it's trending.
We'll give you some examples today. This might be a little confusing to understand how this impacts the reports, but as we get into the reports themselves, we'll kind of show you how some of the changes in this section of report settings adjust the look and feel of a report.
Okay, and then there's a section on participant demographics. So of the institutions that participated, it kind of shows the scale of what the enrollment values are at the different campuses that have participated. That's just one of the sections, the sources of information.
So someone's going to be asking, who are you comparing yourself to when you're talking about all participants? So this will give you a lot of different viewpoints. So these are in enrollment ranges. The biggest participants are the 20,000 plus student FTEs, but the second biggest is the 5 to 12,000 student FTEs. But there's also in relationship to regions of the country and the type of Carnegie class, if it's community colleges, if it's high research, or if our typical Carnegie class in the CSU system is master granting baccalaureate degree institutions, 4-year institutions with master granting is our typical Carnegie class. But so there's a variety of categories, and then it gives you a number of who's participated. So in case you get that question, it's available.
So and the importance of that demographics is when you do comparative analysis, who you're comparing yourself to makes a big difference. So if you're a large campus comparing to a small campus and you're looking at staffing and funding levels, well, you're not looking at apples to apples. So when you're running your reports and you want to make a case, you may need to make sure that the demographics of who you're doing your comparators with are similar to your campus. So that demographics area gives you the number of campuses in each one of those discrete areas. And we'll show a little bit more as we get deeper into this, how that impacts reporting.
Okay, there's also a section on prior year reports. So it's not just the data that's generated for this year, but you can go back and look at reporting from previous years if you're interested in doing that. In that section on that. And then there's a section for Excel reports. So a lot of these reports that come up, you'll see bar charts and data. If you want to export that stuff to Excel and work with it, that's capable from any of the reports that are run within the tool. So just know that that's available. And then there's executive level dashboards. And I think I think there's maybe 10 or 12 reports in this executive level dashboard. It's something that was asked to pull together by APPA. So if you go into there, it's sort of high level reports, summary reports on a lot of the information that we're looking at. And there's sort of pre-canned reports that you can go through and see if some of those are reports that'll work for you. A lot of them are also in the detailed section, but just know that if you want looking at just wanting summary level data, that's a good place to go to just before you start drilling down into more detail.
And this is the area where you could only select 3 comparative campuses. It doesn't have to be in the CSU. It could be Fullerton and Arizona State and Georgia Tech. So it could be any 3 campuses that you'd like to compare yourself against, and more similar to the NACUBO reports than the FBI.
Okay, so now the rest of our discussion will be around these detailed data reports within the FBI. And this is the section you go to, which will bring up the list of full reports. So today, what we thought we would do is run through about these 10 reports, which sort of hit on all the different key data points and groupings that we talked about earlier, an example of one of them in each one of those sections. And so these are just the list of reports we're going to run through, and we'll sort of show you how to navigate to these specific reports. But within each one of those sections, there's a number of different ways you can look at and view the data.
So before we jump into this, I kind of want to give a little background that I gave when we did the report training doing the data input, because I think it's still pertinent to talk about from a campus perspective, and certainly from the individuals doing this data input, why is it important to you to be putting this information in it? And why is it important to you that the data is accurate and correct? So it's a fascinating time right now in CSU, and it's an interesting process we're going through, being part of an institution that's this old and this large. And the fact that right now we're going through this extreme transformational phase in CSU, and the way we're doing business today is very different than we've done business in the past. And the way we're going to be doing business in the future is being shaped by a lot of the decisions that we're making today. And how that impacts you on your campus in your particular position is that it's as we're going through this transformation to something new and different, we want to track and understand, and so do you, want to track and understand what that change impact is. Because we do quality improvement programs over the past 10 years, things that track our deferred maintenance, things that track our staffing levels, our funding levels in these various areas, we've been able to successfully pitch a case to our capital planning group as facility operations and to the Board of Trustees to get them to shine a spotlight on some of the critical programs that have been neglected in the past, certainly through our capital program. The lack of funding in deferred maintenance, the lack of funding in capital renewal has been more a function of the state really not appropriately supporting CSU. And that's changed. That's changed in the way that the CSU is funded. That's changed in new authorities that we have for getting funding, bonding funds. And how that's going to impact campuses is we're going to see a greater priority put in the funding for those particular areas, right? We're going to, for the first time in a decade, we're going to see a substantial amount of resources put towards infrastructure renewal, capital renewal on buildings, and that's going to impact not only your funding levels, it's going to impact your staffing levels. It is going to give campus directors and management teams the ability to do things that they haven't been able to do in the past, right? Some of these may be one-time funding opportunities, some of them may be long-term funding opportunities, but what APPA is going to track for us is what those levels are. What level are we getting? Is your base level funding increasing based on these new programs? Is your staffing level increasing based on these programs? And what we at the CO would be very interested to know is how that impacts campuses and how it's going to impact it long term. And so as the funding mechanisms change and as the dynamics of what we're reporting on change, it's important to track and measure that. And you want to have that information at your campus to understand how does that impact, how does growth of students impact the effect on facilities? If your student population increases, what does that mean for your facilities operations? So student graduation initiatives are important in CSU. Student enrollment levels are important in CSU. So as these dynamic points change within your university, how does that impact your operation? Well, the only way to understand that is to put accurate data in systems like this and track it over time. So that's how it's important to you to get if you get the question of why is your staffing level increasing? How are you going to answer that question? How is it in relationship to other campuses, the change that you're getting additional funding, that your student population has increased? To be able to answer those questions is critical to have these metrics accurate on an annual basis. So I just want to set that foundation so those doing the data input have a greater understanding of it's not just another number you got to put in a spreadsheet, but how the bigger picture really impacts your campus in the overall CSU picture, right? We've been successful at collecting and reporting this information. Now we're kind of seeing the rewards of that effort. Now we want to track long-term what the impacts are going forward. All right, so just want to set that foundation before we get into the detail of some of the minutia of this that you might say, why are we even tracking this information? Why is it important? You know, just another tick on a spreadsheet somewhere for somebody to look at. It's deeper and more important than that. Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if we need to go talk about these. We'll talk about them in the details sections rather than But another thing I just wanted to, which we didn't mention at the beginning, we have 23 out of 23 campuses participating in this voluntary program, which is remarkable. You're not going to go to police and see that. You're not going to go to academic affairs and see that. You're not going to go to any other department in the CSU system that has 100% participation in a voluntary quality program. So it's kudos to your organization. So if you're getting beat up by this data, say, we're taking the higher road, we're looking at making improvements and understanding our facilities portfolio over the long period of time, and it's really a feather in your cap that should be utilized. That the facilities organization is a much more professional organization than it was 20 years ago, or the maintenance folks is cleaning toilets or whatever, or clearing sewer lines. But now we are, highly professional, very analytical, and utilize tools to improve the use of our resources on a daily basis. 23 out of 23 in the FBI, 19, I believe, out of 23 in the NACUBO report. So, and this is only the third or fourth year of NACUBO. So we're just getting used to that and coming up to speed. So it's really a feather in your hat.
And the facilities data used to be not talked about a lot at senior level leadership. It was, the operation of the campus. And yeah, it's important for funding and getting staffing. It's a big chunk of the staffing. But the more we elevate the professionalism of our organization and really have the capability of answering these questions, the more the questions get asked. And it was interesting. I had an opportunity to talk with Tracy last night after our training yesterday, and she had mentioned that she had gotten an email from her president asking for very specific facilities-related data. And without this type of benchmarking data collection, to be able to answer a question specific to staffing, custodial staffing levels per student FTE would be a hard number to come up with. But now you'd have that information at your fingertips. So I think it's interesting that even campus presidents are really in tune to the operations at the facilities level and are asking those kind of key questions on how to benchmark themselves against other institutions.
So we need to firmly establish ourselves on our campuses as the facilities professional, as the executive who knows the information, is the go-to person to get the information. It's not some president having to call some third-party group out of Chicago to come out and ask information from which you probably have at your fingertips here. So anyway.
You may be the executive in charge of that department. You may be a trade supervisor. You may be an administrator. So we have all levels of people, doing this data input. But at every level, these questions should be asked. And if your supervisor comes and asks you, even at an administrator level, it's great to have that level of information or be able to go to it and know where to get the information, or even have it in your hip pocket to be able to provide that back.
Right. Yeah, to keep you from running fire drills, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Available to you. So just before we move on, Tracy.
I mean, I agree that we all need to have a quick fact sheet on our desk to answer that. But one of the places that we've talked about going after we kind of get our act together a little tiny bit more around this is the need. It's necessary for us to produce an annual facilities report to the campus, kind of like a state of facilities report that serves to both educate the campus. It's available on our website that can be downloaded, but which is also shared with University Senate and the exec cabinet and other folks, so that they gain a broader understanding of not just of who we are, but if they're tasked with making broader decisions, they understand how those decisions, they aren't making them in a silo. They understand that there's a trade-off for some of the decisions they have, so that we have some shared stewardship on our campus.
Yep. Right. So before we move on from this sheet, I just kind of wanted to talk about how we selected these reports. And if you go back to the slides previous when we were talking about data points and grouping levels, you can see we've taken some of the aspects from all of those and compared them. So we've got water per student FTE is our first one, right? So we're looking at water use per student for the FTE, the number of students we have. You could also look at, compare any of those data points. And so as you go through here, it's really, these are some that we've selected, but depending on your objectives of what you're trying to look at or what answers you're trying to conclude at, you would look at those data points and compare them in different ways. So through this, we've taken a lot of the NACUBO data points and compared them with some of the data that's collected in the FBI and that kind of stuff. So just keep in mind that there's sort of infinite number of combinations of the data points we've collected that you can compare and contrast. Okay, this is just a screen is how to go in and launch the dashboards for the NACUBO area, which is the first report we're going to go into. So this is the checklist that comes up under the NACUBO reports, and the one that we're going to talk about first is the water use per student FTE. But you can see these are the reports that are generated from the data that's collected in the NACUBO information. So it's looking at energy, carbon footprint, garbage, recycling, and water. Those are pretty much.
And that's the full extent of the NACUBO report. That's what your vice presidents would be pulling up when they for their pick list. You can look at all of those, or just one of them. Okay, this report represents, I believe it's 19 campuses. Those are all the campuses that have participated in the NACUBO report. And I've got a disclaimer in the FPI report, all 23 campuses did not show up in our presentation we'll be showing you. So when we go live, we can show you some all 23. So you might not see your campus in the other one. And if you didn't participate in this, you're not going to see your campus here. So you can see there's quite a bit of fluctuation. This is measuring water is relatively new to our organization. We're trying to look at it and understand it more at this level. It's not quite as hot a topic as it was a couple months ago with all the rains we've had, but it's still a topic that's not going to go away, and something that we need to find some good measurements and metrics from which to improve upon. Now, this particular screenshot here is looking, there's some radio buttons at the top of these reports that allows you to look at it from different perspectives. This one here is called the institutional view, which brings up all of the CSUs who have participated. If you clicked your campus, all you would see is your own individual campus with all your Carnegie groups. If we picked, we logged into the Humboldt account and we saw Humboldt's number and Humboldt's Carnegie group. So we'd see the group between, what's your FTE? 12,000 something? Oh, okay. So their Carnegie group would be the enrollment range of 5 to 12,000. They'd be the Pacific Coast region. They'd be a master granting institution and one or two other categories. So the collective information from those particular Carnegie groups would show up in a graphical form with just your campus. So that's what you're going to see. So you can slice it and dice it a lot of different ways. They say this is pretty new, but I think it's important, particularly as our sustainability groups get stronger and more vocal, that we need to be able to manage and understand this information for what it is.
You may jump out to the live app and show some of the stuff that you were the webpage.
Yeah, it'd be fine if.
We can see that Cal Poly Pomona students are pretty parched, and San Bernardino campus students are drowning, based on those reports.
So I'm just going to jump out to the report so we can look at some of the radio buttons and stuff that Rob was talking about.
It's always scary going live.
We can do it.
Inevitably, something's going to break.
We can do it.
This, as I told you, is we've logged into the Humboldt account. So there's Humboldt, and this is trending over the 3 years of the report. So, and there's the comparative groups, and with the radio buttons on the top, so that's the institutional profile. So if they got their master granting Auxiliary services are included. Note that that's different from the FPI. We excluded auxiliary services in the FPI, and we recommended including them in the, so that changes your square footage and changes your consumption.
So a little explanation on this chart real quick. So the three bars are three separate years that are being shown in each one. So Humboldt, all the way to the left, blue was 2 years ago, the orange was last year, and green is this year. I believe that's the way it's set up.
It's 14.
Yeah, 14, 15, and 16 reporting years. And then the Carnegie class, the auxiliary services, and the APPA region, PC APPA, are averages across all of those participating institutions in each one of those calendar years or fiscal years in our particular case. So the water consumption per student in 2014 for Humboldt was 16, and the Carnegie class average was 28. 28, 26, 28. So that's how the report reads. And if you look at the this year's data, so for Humboldt, their water per student was 15 point, I can't read it, 15.
If you scroll across it, the number will pop up.
And then for the PC APPA, look how extreme that is. Yeah, 66. So a significant difference on the average for all PC APPA participants versus what Humboldt's average is.
So one of the areas that we always excel in as an institution is data points compared to FTE. Because and we'll have a slide about this a little bit later, but our density as an institution is always a lot more dense than other institutions. So whenever we do comparisons with the FTE, we always fare really well in those kind of analysis.
Yeah. Why don't you look at those buttons at the top?
Okay. So this is the slide that's in the PowerPoint, looking at the institutions and looking at the different levels.
Maybe the APPA region.
Yeah, APPA region.
Yeah.
So those are the various APPA regions across the country, and then an overall to the far right. So we can see how PC APPA, our region, compares to other regions on water use per student, which is interesting on why we're so high in comparison to other regions.
And probably a lot of it has to do with the irrigation.
Climate. Yep, climate. That's right.
Mm-hmm. So we're back to the slide.
Yep.
Okay, the next data point we're going to look at is again from the NACUBO, and this is the top selection in the list that we saw. So we're looking at energy BTUs per total gross square foot.
Okay, again, and this is important information to know where you stand in relation, know what your trending is. And if you look at our trends, almost in every case we look at trends over time, we see really dramatic improvement, particularly the longer you look over the years. But we consistently do pretty darn good work in terms of our energy consumption and use. So when you look at the BTUs or the MMBTUs, we are talking about the trends, natural gas consumption and kilowatt hours, electrical consumption, and transposed to BTUs or MMBTUs. Nathan, did you have a question? Okay. So again, is this live, Joe?
Yeah.
Okay, Joe's back to the live picture there. And you can look if your campus participated where you stand in that relation and what your vice presidents might look at. And, you know, we see one campus there that's sticking out pretty high. So if you were at campus, you might want to get into those numbers before somebody asks the question and understand, were my inputs appropriate? Did I use my full campus gross square foot in this case, or did I use my general fund square foot and then my total campus BTUs, which could drive that number up if you made an error in your survey. Or yeah. So I mean, if you're exceptionally low or exceptionally high, you might want to make sure you understand that number in its entirety, because you might be, asked the question and either by a sustainability group or your vice president or your budget committee, or but certainly you should understand these numbers.
Could be.
It could be a typo or an error in the submission, or a misunderstanding of the differences between the FPI and the survey and the NACUBO.
Yeah, more likely in this case, it's an error in the type of data that was used, right? So the two primary drivers are energy and square footage in this particular calculation, right? And when we're looking at square footage in the NACUBO, it's a different set of square footage than we're looking at in the FPI. So if you use the FPI square footage, which is isolated strictly to state, and then you use that square footage for this number, you're going to look, yeah, exactly. So that would be the first place I'd look for East Bay and say, which square footage did you use? That's going to drive your BTU number up. But actually, Joe, can you go back to the live real quick? I'm actually interested in seeing what campuses, so right here, you're looking at your campus. I'm sure you've all focused in on what your campus energy usage is in comparison to other CSUs. But let's take a look at campus data in APPA region. So take a look at your information in comparison to what, wow.
Southern.
Whew. Yeah,
A lot of coal.
how about Carnegie class? Let's take a look at Carnegie class.
So the associate on the far left is the community colleges. Yeah, and we're not sure what drives that number like that.
And
Beta.
yeah, it could be
Maybe
beta data.
Right.
Anything that looks funky right now, we're blaming on beta data. Institutional profile. That's that one. Yeah. Yeah, go to institutional profile and it'll show what the, yeah, there you go. That looks more,
big
that looks
hand
more
for
accurate.
Humboldt. Look at that improvement.
Look at that. Year-over-year improvement for energy. Nice. And you're kind of seeing that's a trend across the country, as those other averages have also dropped year-over-year. Energy usage in the nation is a concern in all institutions, right? So we're all looking at better energy consumption and improvement, energy efficiency programs. And if you did a 10-year average on this, you'd really look at the substantial drop over time of energy consumption. So that's actually what I wanted to see. Thank you, Joe.
Okay, so now we're going to look at a report from the FPI. So we're switching out of the NACUBO and looking at the FPI. And the first data pointer we're looking at would be within the grounds and maintenance aspect of the survey. And here we're comparing grounds per acre per FTE. So this is the data side that you go into, and then to generate the graph, you can see the little icon at the top there. That'll take that data and put it into a graph format.
So to put that in layman's terms, grounds per acre per FTE. So this is how much acreage is each one of your grounds workers working on average. What's the overall acreage for the campus? How many grounds workers do you have? And so on average, how much acreage is each one of your grounds worker assigned?
So the lower the bar there, the more you've invested into your grounds and landscaping program. And, it might reflect, you'll see San Francisco is probably one of the lowest, but they've, it's a very dense campus and portfolio. You're looking at the highest one over in the left there, which is San Luis Obispo. We think that there could be an error in terms of including too much of their ag space, their farm space or whatever, because we don't really think that, what's that Hover over that one.
This is,
Yeah.
oh, this isn't live.
Oh, that's not live. Okay, which is
32.7.
32.7 acres per grounds worker, which is way above the average, and their campus looks very nice. It's, so we think that probably the acreage may not be represented to your maintainable acreage. So maintainable is if you're cutting the weeds for fire twice a year, it's really not the maintainable acres. And so there's probably some normalization that needs to take place in a couple of those.
But yeah, I think this data you could use this to either look at adding additional staff if you're looking to upgrade the level of the grounds and the appearance of the grounds on your campus, or it also might lend to an explanation of why your grounds look so great and why you're best in class, where you've got you're maintaining a large number of acres per person and it still looks fantastic.
Or if your staff better than the average and your campus looks not as good as the average, you might sit down with your grounds team or managers and ask the questions. What are we doing? Maybe we should do a site visit to this other campus that looks so good where our fundings are similar to, and find out, look at what their tools and equipments are, what their task and frequency is, what their training is, how they utilize contracts maybe to supplement their forces, other things like that. So it opens the door for being more informed. And when someone's complaining to you about, we need more staffing, we need more this, you're armed with this type of information that says, well, actually, here's where we stand. We're staffed well below the staffing level of the average in the CSU system and such. So you can utilize this data in a number of aspects and areas when issues come up. But knowing this information is really important and handy.
So if I was a director or if I was a supervisor in a particular trade shop and I have my staff coming to me saying, hey, we need more help, we need more people, first place I would look, APPA FPI, at what my staffing level is in comparison to other peer institutions. What's my funding level in comparison to other peer institutions? So that gives you some ammunition to go have those conversations about where you stand in comparison to other institutions that are similar to you. Are you staffed higher? Are you funded higher? Are you staffed lower, funded lower for the same type of work that's being done on other campus institutions?
But what and this isn't the only place you can do it. No single graph is going to give you the full picture. What you might look at while you're looking at this, swing over to the ground staffing per student full-time equivalent. Because every student on your campus equates to trash, litter, gum on the walk, walking across the lawns, all that stuff. So, and where we're particularly effective and where our numbers look really good in comparison to the rest of the nation is most of the numbers per student FTE. So if you're trying to make an impression upon your vice president of, look at the density level of our campus, here's how many grounds workers we have per student FTE in relationship to the rest of the country or the rest of the Pacific Coast region or whatever. So it's you can look at it a lot of different ways, and it tells a little bit different story. And then at such point, you can do some equations in terms of how much time do we spend picking up litter and disposing of trash per grounds worker today? Is it 25%, 30%? The denser it is, the more that number goes up. So it gives you the basis from which to make staffing decisions and justifications at various levels.
Okay, the next data point we're going to look at is
I'm not going to like this, Jason.
AFOE.
There's one campus that's in double digits. So this is obviously an area that gets critical review by senior leadership and by staff, right? How dense we are in our administration. So these are all the support staff, leadership, management, and how does that compare to the overall facilities budget? So a facilities, when we look at the AFOE, again, that's the total allocation to a facilities department for baseline operations, not including the one-time funding for things like deferred maintenance. So that's your AFOE. And what we're looking at in this number is the percentage of the overall AFOE dedicated towards the administration of the facilities.
Well, this number actually is the AFOE plus the purchased utilities. So, and we chose that graph to include purchased utilities, and you've got an option when you're talking about operations. Generally, we're talking excluding purchased utilities. In this case, oftentimes the administrative function in the organization is managing the purchased utilities. So we felt it more appropriate to show this individual slide as a percentage of that.
So I know that we work really hard, and I'm at a loss to remember what we did, but we work really hard at removing out those cost recovery based staff. So like the carpenter and, you know, this FTE and that FTE. The question becomes, and I can't remember what we did, but how much of your administration or overhead also gets associated with that cost recovery? Because it's not 100% of Randy's effort, as an example, that actually is working on stateside funded activities because he's managing cost recovery projects or work orders.
Well, there is some artistic liberty that needs to be taken in these regards. And if you've done any detailed analysis in terms of your indirect costs on top, there is a certain amount of indirect costs that are associated with an hour of labor that goes towards administrative functions. And so that cumulatively can oftentimes add up to an FTE that might be transposed to loosely a superintendent of building and trades, might in reality be being funded out of the chargeback activity and thus removed from that equation. And so, I mean, thinking creatively like that and make sure that you're not overtaxing yourself in terms of your administrative function, particularly because even though I don't consider Northridge to be overstaffed by any means. It actually, in many cases, you're viewed as probably one of the best programs in terms of administrative functions and compliance and participation in the system. And maybe that's where we all need to be. We don't know, but.
And I know Jason has a comment, but one of my comments about the easy way to look at it is to look at it by what was our total overall budget after we went through cost recovery plus stateside, and then just dividing out the percentages and make an assumption across the board that administratively, whatever percentage of our total overall revenues coming in due to cost recovery, that's the percentage of our administrative time that ended up being dedicated to cost recovery efforts versus stateside efforts, and then backing out those costs accordingly.
Yeah, so there are opportunities to put portions of positions in there. Half of an associate director would be dedicated perhaps to, as I say, it isn't an exact science, and they have to make informed decisions on some of this type of stuff in lieu of exact information.
If for anybody that might be surreptitiously looking in on this and has significant concerns for Northridge and are going to meet me in my office when I get back. There are some challenges that we have, and we may at Northridge be a perfect storm to look like this, to be so grossly off the number. And what, Rob, maybe next year we need to sit down and talk, because we have some functions, including asset management, full-time staff, and students that is typically on the financial side of the house, that we handle that role and function. We have postal services and delivery on campus. We have a distribution center. We have a duplication area, some very odd functions. And we're like, well, gosh, where do we put them? And then we don't pay utilities. That is paid centrally. So you add all those factors in and bam, we're going to be way up. But if we added the $4 million worth of utilities back in there and readjusted where those folks go, we may be a little further off. So I hate seeing this
is not so much the graph, it's understanding the data and why.
Correct.
And then the survey input time, if you do have a manager overseeing your facility or your mail and property, perhaps, it belongs in other facilities activities or other non-facilities type activities. So, becoming more and more aware of this and removing those positions taking your associate director for grounds and landscaping, perhaps, and that belongs in the grounds and landscaping portfolio rather than the administrative portfolio. So if they're, or maybe as you have an administrator who's in charge of custodial and grounds, split them 50-50 and put them into those units rather than overinflating your administrative. So, you know, chances are that's where some of the reasons are, and also that you said you didn't report your purchase utilities, but regardless of who pays them, you could still report it and make that number probably normalize more.
So we are a little over 2 hours into this. So I think it might be appropriate to take a quick 10-minute break, especially for those in the room. And why don't we come back in about 10 minutes? What time we got right now? So why don't we come back at 10:30, and we'll get started again. So I just want to take a quick 10-minute break. You guys need to cut?
Like it'd be like
Yeah.
I don't want to say anything.
When we reference the live charts, they'll be in there. This was a snapshot in time from the beta data that wasn't accurate.
Right. Got it.
I think we better go back to live, or back to.
All right, we're going to come back online now. And we will resume with our next chart being AFOE per CRV. So annual facilities operating expenditures per current replacement value. So this is doing a comparative analysis between the overall replacement value for your facilities with the annual facilities operating expenditure being a percentage of that. So what your facilities operating expenditure is in comparison to the value of your overall campus. Let you take it from there, Joe.
Joe, would you mind switching over to live and taking a look at the same graph? We have a couple campuses that aren't showing up in these snapshot in time due to some, it was a snapshot for some of the beta data that, and so we think the live data is going to be all inclusive.
Rob, you want to help me navigate to that? Of course.
Go to the CSU campuses on the right top.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Okay, then the
Select all.
Yeah. And then about the second or third down.
So is Sonoma listed in there?
Yeah. It's right here.
Yeah, the third one down, Joe.
Okay.
Yeah, it's only 13. Interesting.
Oh, it's only 13
yeah,
showing up?
Only 13 showing up in that.
Okay, so the answer is we're going to go back to the beta database. It was there a couple of days ago. All 23 campuses were showing up. We'll have to make a call to APPA as they stabilize this information and data. So we apologize. I think you can probably pull your own data up from your campus at this point. That after we're done with this session, we'll contact APPA and find out what's going on at the moment.
So it looks like not all of the campuses are included in our cohort right now. So we'll have them include the additional people into that cohort.
Okay.
So yeah, you can click on that graph again, Joe. And here you can kind of see how the graph gets a little dense depending on how many years of data we're looking at. So it looks like here we're looking at 3 years worth of data, or 4 years worth of data. Oh yeah, some of the campuses didn't report. So let's use this as a learning experience on how to change that. So if you pull up a graph and you have too many years of data, where you change that is in the data settings portion of the report. So right now, scroll down, yep. Right here, yep. So this is showing the years that are being tracked. So you can uncheck the years that you don't need and just, yep, 2 years worth, 15, 16. save it, and then go back in and run a detailed report, and that should just now show us 2 years worth of data.
I think Joel made the wrong selection.
There we go. So that's how you make an adjustment to the way a report looks using the report settings tabs.
The green line across the center there is the national average of those numbers too, by the way. Joe, I think you picked the wrong tab. I directed you the wrong way. If you go back to detailed data reports.
There was 2 CSUs on there, I saw.
Yeah, I think we created some.
CSU campuses and CSU, oh, small? Oh, interesting. CSU LA comps, small campuses.
Okay. Or you can go over and look at your all survey participants list.
Yeah, that's where you can pick cohorts outside of CSU.
Scroll down and
You'll see all of them now.
if you start with, so just select all. No, deselect.
Yeah. Clear all.
Clear all. And then if you go down with starting with the C's, you're going to see our Cal States for most of them. And so we'll just create a group now. And you can create your own comparative group.
Oh, Cal State University system.
That's just for our login convenience. There's no data.
Gotcha.
There's Pomona on the right,
East
Chico,
Bay, Long
Fresno.
Beach, Channel Islands, all down from the one you just clicked, Joe. Yeah, Channel Islands, East Bay, Long Beach, Northridge, San Marcos.
Is Cal Poly on there?
LA.
Yeah, Cal Poly State University is on there now. So, and then you scroll down, pick up Humboldt, and then go down to the S's.
User interface, is there a certain survey result that you can customize and keep saved on your profile?
Yes.
You don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, so the question from Nathan, is your mic on? Was can you save your preferences in your user profile? And the answer is yes.
Rob, where's the other ones? I got Humboldt.
Humboldt, go down to the S's for start at San Diego, San Marcos, San Jose, and then Sonoma will be a little bit separate.
There it is. All right, I think
That should be all 23. Save that selection. And then run an example report.
So that was a quick example of how to create a cohort of campuses that you want to look at. We just happen to select all CSU campuses for this.
So it gets a little busy with multiple years.
So as Rob said, the green line, if you can see it online, that runs through the center is an average of all campus participants. And then this report happens to be set up, what's that?
The latest year.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
average in the year that you're looking at, right, that's correct. And off to the right, you'll also see that we have comparators for student FTE population for averages. Now that can also be changed in the report settings to reflect something different than student FTE populations.
So when you're doing trending of years, generally, the general rule of thumb, you would pick a handful of campuses or just your own campus. And it's just way too much information.
Okay. Anything else about this one?
Nope.
Okay. Okay. The next one, we're going to look back at another NACUBO report. So we're looking at electrical consumption per total gross square feet.
Now, we have Amy here from the Energy Group who works with Mike and Aaron under their direction to provide the energy numbers for those campuses that have submitted good data on the front end. And we can feed that back to you at the survey input timeframes to help to further make these numbers as accurate as possible. So,
So to expand on that a little bit, Rob, the campuses and their energy groups are required to submit monthly energy reports, or MERs, and we take that data that's collected, and for the FPI data input, we collect all that and submit that back to campuses to provide data input for FPIs. So using your data that you submit monthly, we aggregate that, send that back out to campuses. So the energy numbers that are showing here get vetted by campuses based on their monthly energy reports. So when we provide that data back to you prior to data submission for this report, that's where the information is coming from. And here it is again, using the NACUBO reporting. Find your campus, see how you compare to the overall average.
now in our case, we might want to look at our energy consumption in relationship to student FTE. So could you back out and go to that one?
Mm-hmm.
See how this changes the portfolio. You can pick all of those, and they would give you a rolling total of all of that.
Yeah, show how you can select two of them, Joe. So do the per GSF, and then, yeah, there you go, per student FTE.
There's the gross square foot we've been looking at.
See how you select more than one? It just puts the graphs one right after the next.
But see how far below we are the national average when we start talking about FTE. So each FTE is responsible for some level of energy consumption, and we do a terrific job when we start looking at it. So if we're trying to blow our own horn, this is where you'd want to go in terms of energy consumption. So look, what is the number for Humboldt in the current year?
So it's 1.6
Or if you hover over that, it'll,
kilowatts per student.
there you go. So 1.6 kilowatts. Now look at the institutional profile, or institutions in the radio button. So the national average, I forgot to take a notation of that, but it's out of the picture. It's above the graph line there. It's 4 point whatever.
4.6.
So going back to the institution, the national average doesn't even show up in this comparative graph in the CSU. So it's really some, a place when we talk about recognition and recognizing the efforts of your staff and stuff. It's an area to build momentum and say, look how well we're doing. Look at our trend where we're going and gaining department-wide participation and demonstrating to your sustainability groups and staff of we're really working hard and doing good work here, and we're continuing to improve every year. Tracy.
Just a question, and this is a question for the group, because I know just from talking to some colleagues, at Humboldt, our utility budget is centrally managed, just like it is at Northridge. But it's a pure utility budget. There's no staffing associated with that utility budget. We don't have a central plant either, which is kind of a uniqueness. I know on some other campuses, colleagues either have the utility budget within their department, or even if it's centrally managed, they actually have staff assigned to that utility budget. Do we have any clear definition on when we do have staff assigned to a utility budget, regardless where it's at, where those staff members get reported? Because the question becomes, are we double counting those costs when we report a utility budget and then also reporting how many folks are working in energy and utilities? So just, I think it might be a point of clarification that would be good to get direction on.
Okay, yeah, and if we look at the FPI report and the energy and utilities segment and look under staffing and salaries window, it'll show which campuses reported how many FTEs, and if they did the detailed report, what classification those FTEs are in. Typically, you'll see them in an energy manager, maybe some control specialist, maybe a BSE or operator.
Right. If you report them there, but they're actually in the utilities budget, regardless of whether that's held in your department or centrally managed, and then you go and report your total utility costs, we're counting that dollar twice in our overall reporting. Wouldn't we want to back it out of something? And I'm not sure where to back it out of, because I think they're looking, right.
FTE should only show up in one area.
Right, but I think of, and I'm not sure how, when we have utility staff, this is in our situation, but when we have utility staff that are assigned to the utility budget and we're doing this energy cost reporting, I'm not sure if we're just taking the raw energy costs or if we're also including the staffing energy costs for that in terms of what our overall utility budget is. I know on campus we might think of it as part of our overall utility budget, but for the sake of reporting and understanding our consumption per FTE or our GHG emissions, I think you need to back out those staff costs because they aren't generating the GHGs.
They are. They're backed out, and particularly in the Kubo report, it's talking strictly about the commodities. It's talking about the MMBTUs and not particularly dollars. You know, the Nakubo report is, we'd like to consider it really highly visible, very political, and sustainability type based. So these are much more visible and social conscious measurements in relationship to the FPI, where we talk more about dollars and staffing. And so the FPI does blend in positions oftentimes with the energy budget in that relations, but you can drill down and just look at the commodities as well. But really to look at the consumption of the commodity is the Nakubo report, probably your best bet. And Amy's just coming up to speed. Amy hasn't been with the system very long, and so she's just becoming familiar with this information and doing some cross-references to the actual MER reports and the system-wide view of energy consumption in relationship to these numbers. And we're going to work together with them to normalize these and make sure that they're, when you look at this, it's the same as looking at any other energy report.
So why don't you give us a detailed analysis right now? No, I'm just kidding.
Hang on just a moment, Amy, you can take the mic.
Sorry. And we will have the EIS Energy Information System quite soon, so everything will be easier later. And we'll try to make sure like everything you see from the FPI will be the same as like your energy report. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. Yep. Thank you.
Joe's going to get carpal tunnel from us making him jump around so much.
I signed up for. Okay, so next report we're going to look at is AFE for GIE.
It's probably one of the more important benchmarks from a facilities director perspective relating to overall allocation of a facilities budget in relationship to the total gross institutional expenditures or budget in this case. So out of all of the money that a campus receives to operate the entire campus as a whole, what percentage of that budget is dedicated towards facilities operating expenditures? So this number, pretty uniform across the board. Joe's going to jump into the live version of this real quick so we can take a look at it. But when you want to compare yourself to the overall facilities budget of other peer institutions, this is a great data point to take a look at. So from a facilities director perspective, what his overall allocation is as a percentage of the gross institutional expenditure is one of those important numbers that we're looking at here. isn't what I find it around.
Right there. Yeah. Keep going.
Scroll down now. There you go. There it is.
Why don't you go back and remove the multi-year?
Get the year off there, right?
So just going into report settings, I'm going to make this a single year so it's a little easier to read.
And while he's doing that, periodically you get new academic space or general fund type space, and with that comes some staffing or some funding to the campus. Whether it gets to you or not is a different story, but somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 a gross square foot, and that's for ongoing maintenance, upkeep, repair, also for technology employees and technicians and other things. It's all encompassing to maintain these buildings, but sometimes you're brought in and say to make a justification of what kind of positions would you hire? You know, how many custodians you need for this 175,000 square foot new science building? How many plumbers or painters or whatever? How are you going to expend your resources, or what's your request for funding? So having empirical data like this and going forward with this information is very powerful in terms of, you know, what we really need is custodial or some trades workers or some skilled level trades or whatever. You've got some data from which to build your case. Okay, yeah, the grouping is pretty tight in this. You know, and if you find yourself on the way lower end of that, you've certainly got some room to have some discussions with your, particularly if they start talking quality. We'd like better services, more services and stuff, you know, and start looking at this and first verify the accuracy of the information. And, you know, you've got the opportunity to make a case. Nobody is certainly out of line on this. Now, when you look at this in relation to gross institutional expenditures in relation to the rest of the country, keep in mind the density level of how many people we cram into our spaces. Because each of those equate into costs in terms of utilization of the restrooms, consumption of energy and paper goods, and all of the other things, the number of times the doorknobs get open and the walls scuffed, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Do they have a good way of looking at that for the benchmark?
Density? Yes. And we're going to get to that in a few minutes.
So another factor on doing comparative analysis with this particular benchmark is what we're seeing on the right of this graph is important, because student population equates to size of institution, right? And when you're looking at size of overall budget and the operating expenditure for a campus, the smaller campuses, you're going to see the larger percentages for facilities operating expenditures. As you can see on the graph, the 5 or 6 data points to the right, the smaller the campus, less student population, the larger the percentage is for the facilities operating budget. And that equates to the smaller campuses in our system also. So the San Marcos campuses, actually San Marcos is actually small. East Bay, the
well, yeah, certainly the Maritime. So if you're Maritime and you're looking right about the average of the gross institutional expenditures and a percent of your facilities budget, you go over and look at your campus at 1,000 FTE for the nation, and wow, you're almost half of what those campuses are being funded. So in the justification, when you start talking about that, you say, you've got a very small staff and operation, but you've got all of the requirements. You've got all of the environmental and policies and executive orders and state regulations and laws and union contracts and all that stuff. So you're really operating on a shoestring when you're the same average as at a very small campus and you're just hitting the average.
So most of the campuses you see above the line on the average are our smaller campuses, and the majority of the campuses below the line are the larger campuses. But if there's a campus like a San Marcos that is far below the line, and their percentage, even though they're a small campus, is in the 4.25% range, I'd be looking at either the data points or my funding level. I'd be looking at how, that I would feel that if my data points are correct, that my funding level as a percentage of gross institutional expenditure is low. I'm not getting the same amount of funding that other campuses in a similar boat as me would be getting. So those are the, you know, it's going to affect the quality of the campus, right? Because we're talking about the overall facilities budget and what they're being allocated to maintain that entire departmental operation.
Can you clarify on the far right side where there's
Talking about the enrollment.
is that, like for instance, let's see the 1,000 to 1,999. I'm assuming that that's beyond just our cohort here.
It is.
Yep.
That's overall all participants.
Nationwide.
Yep.
So if you wanted to see how many campuses that was, you could go to the demographics tab, and you could also take, you could sort the entire list and look at the actual names of the campuses of which you're talking about. And at that point, you could, you know, if you went to a particular campus in New Mexico and you could pull that campus up and look at it and say it's very comparable to us. And I'd like to compare myself in terms of what our, you know, what their budget is versus what our budget is and such. So you can build all types of comparative analysis.
These graphs like this just get you to look at your institution and start asking the question, right? First stop is the data. Second stop is you know, leadership and having this discussion around funding levels, staffing levels based on what you're seeing as these averages.
Okay, now we're going to look at a data point related to custodial. So we can see there's a number of them there. We chose that custodial per gross square feet.
Great benchmark for all of your supervising custodial teams to be looking at in relationship to the total square footage.
I hate to ask you to go live again, Joe, because we're missing a couple of campuses that contract their custodials, and San Marcos is one of them. So you're going to see San Marcos's number and Monterey Bay's number look about half of what some of our averages are and stuff. So if you want to know what the impact of contracting custodial is, you know, it's about half of what it costs to have those services in-house. Now, we're not a proponent of one or the other. It's a reality of the contracts are a lot cheaper. This is a total budget. You need to,
Wrong one.
yeah. So the budgets, obviously, there's a lot of fluctuation in budgets depending on campus
Keep
size.
going down. Keep going down. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right there. Yeah.
There's the cost per square foot. You're seeing a national average of about $1.44. The CSU average is about $1.41, slightly below the national average. Monterey Bay is at $1.04, isn't it? Yep. And San Marcos is at under $1 at 83 cents or something. So when the question comes, what would it cost to bring our custodial staff in-house? You know, San Marcos would probably be looking at the difference between 80, whatever that is, 88 cents to somewhere around $1.40. So 52 cents times their gross square foot of million square foot, 1.5. So if anybody's got a pencil, 1.5 million square feet times 50 cents is $750,000. So pretty easy. So when you have that type of information in your hip pocket, when the vice president throws that out to you in some meeting, what would it cost to bring these in-house? About $750,000. And well, where did he come up with that? So I mean, it's the type of thing that you can quickly do some analysis and really understand your facilities portfolio and the impact of decisions.
Are we going to look at this per student FTE?
Oh, we can?
I always thought that was an interesting, yeah.
I think it's the next one, actually.
Okay, all right, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so let's just go to live.
So scroll down. Oh, there. Okay,
Here, right?
Yeah. Yep. So this is another interesting density factor. If you look at all the CSUs in comparison to the nationwide average, this is the amount of money that we spend in custodial per student. So the average that we spend per student, or actually take a look at the average, the national average spent per student for custodial is $374 per student. You look at your campus and look at what average you're spending for custodial, and this is one of those really impactful density numbers. And custodial is one of those groups that's heavily impacted by the number of the student population on campus. So even more dramatic is the numbers off to the right. So if you pick your student population in comparison to, especially if you're a small campus, the amount on average is being spent for, campuses that are in the less than 5,000 student population range. The numbers are dramatically higher than what we're seeing on our campuses. So we do an excellent job in the efficiency of how we spend our custodial dollars in relationship to the amount of foot traffic that we have on a campus.
So yeah, again, that holds true for almost everything we do, right? Our comparisons to student FTE, both in the NACUBO and any report in the FPI, we always look great because our densities are so much higher, and we're covering so much more foot traffic and people on our grounds than any other institution nationwide.
So when you want an opportunity to share with leadership how well your campuses are doing in comparison to national averages, the student per FTE on landscape and custodial are great benchmarks to really highlight.
And energy.
And energy, yep.
Okay, we're going back to NACUBO.
And here's the density measure of which we talked about that. So your vice presidents have access to this number quite a bit. The national average, yeah, the national average, we're going to have to go live because it's outside of this graph.
Yeah, it's outside. I'll just go live. It'll be easier.
So when you're asked how many tomatoes can you put inside of a 10-pound bag, the answer is available here.
Getting there.
This is great training on how to log into the program.
You're gonna see it a few times. Kind of bounce around and get to these reports.
This one right here, right?
Yeah.
There's a national average, 365 square feet per student FTE. Humboldt is at what?
175 or 262.
If you go to the institutional profile radio button, see the national average doesn't even show up on this CSU graph.
So this is looking at just a basic GSF per student. Not comparing any staffing levels or funding levels, just the amount of square footage on average we have per student. I think the national average is over 300. And we're far less than that on all of our campuses.
Yeah, it's 364 is the national average. At the
364.
Top, so see we're way below. So we've gone through pretty much the slides that were in that 10 list, 10 reports we're going to go through. So at this point, obviously we've been going out to the live app quite a bit, and it's been working pretty well. We wasn't sure how it was going to work in the beta version, but it seems like it's working all right. So if there's any questions or areas that different maybe ideas of reports you'd want to see.
I had a question from one campus. If you could go to the live version.
Yep. Those on the call, if you'd like to ask questions, just type them into the chat pod and we'll get to those questions as they come in.
I think we're going to take a look at the administrative function and show you how you might have a chance to drill down into specific classifications that are what was submitted in the administrative.
Right. Where you want to go, Rob?
Yep, the FPI beta.
Okay.
We have the CSU still picked. Okay.
Yep.
Take off CSU system.
Okay.
There. Bottom one on the left. There you go.
Save it. And go to the administrative.
Detailed left.
Down.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Up. Down. Here? There. Okay, and scroll up a little bit, please. Right there, under the operation costs and staff ratios, pull that menu down up top.
Up at the very top.
Okay. Okay, personnel FTEs. Let's take a look at that.
So you'll see what Joe just did was there's some additional drop downs in each one of the detailed report categories that can drill down into more detailed information other than the base report. Some of the reports have these, and you'll see it says there are 3 sub-reports available. Some don't have sub-reports, but the sub-reports are typically more detail of the core report.
If you scroll down a little bit so we can see the rest of the campuses, there you go, and the headings. So we can look at the different classifications for positions. Now, some people may have just hard-coded a number in of 6 or something like that without detailing where those classifications lie. Others have, most of people have put in the actual classification positions. And Humboldt, as you can see, split some of those up in percentages based on some analysis that they did in terms of what belongs in chargeback, what belongs in areas outside of the day-to-day operations. So those decisions are the conscious decision made to come to the level of detail that they've done. So they're really understanding their operational portfolio well. So you can see where those classifications were input and where you might have opportunities to say, well, you know, this work control manager really does 25% of his work in support of the chargeback operation, tracking information. So, you know, in reality, it's, you know, part of that position is funded out of chargeback is, you know, how it could be viewed and looked at. It's some accounting tricks or whatever. But in reality, you know, that position is there because of support to the non-maintenance side of the house, but for the chargeback side.
Paul has a question.
The staffing, the answer is yes.
Is the detailed FTE report available for all areas?
Yes. If the inputs were put in, the opportunity to put those inputs are available, and probably the same people that put the detailed data inputs at this level put them in at all of their opportunities for identifying their staffing. In the energy, there's a lot of questions about what positions are people having in energy. You know, you'll see some campuses of 17 positions in energy, and it's like, whoa, okay, what are those? And others with none. So, you know, it's a good place to find out and get some information, ask some questions, and look for opportunities.
So, Rob, maybe you can give an explanation. Some campuses put this detailed data in for each position, but some didn't. So does that impact the report overall if they didn't put staffing levels in this area?
No, typically what they would do is just roll in a single number and bypass the detailed data report. The survey inputs is a lot more substantial than the NACUBA report. The NACUBA report, you're answering less than a dozen questions. If you do the full detailed report in the APPA, including all non-mandatory fields, you're doing close to 300 data point of input, something in that neighborhood. I forget what the number is, but we cover that in the training. Or if you could do the express report where you would just say, we have 24 custodians. The 24 would cover supervisors, leads, maybe a technician for equipment, and maybe 18 custodial ones. It's an aggregate number. And if you did a detailed report, you'd break them down into what classifications they fit into. Why don't you read Paula's latest comment?
She just said that she was looking into that, so that was just her response to our question. She's fine.
Oh, she got another one.
Oh, she got another one. Okay. Get her there.
Okay. It's staffing in relation to energy. Okay. Sure.
That's fine. Ask it, please.
Mike?
Yeah.
All right. The first question is wondering if the cost of work order is also included in that, or is this something that's just internal to the campus?
So when you say cost of work orders, define what you mean. Well, you're talking about the material and labor costs associated to a work order?
Yes. Is that something that gets rolled into this survey, or is it something that just remains internal to the campus?
That's not part of this survey.
Yeah, it's talking about overall facilities budgets typically.
And like I said, just from the beginners.
Yeah, it's fine. Good.
And when we're looking at the custodial cost per gross square footage, I was wondering why it was GSF and not ASF, since custodial do not clean GSF.
It's a good question, but it's just a way of normalizing the number.
Okay.
So if everybody's looking at GSF, someday we may sit down in a room and collectively decide to go ASF or custodial square footage. Although that's not the right answer. Custodial square footage is a different animal. Disregard that.
Yeah, there's ASF, NSF, GSF. There's all different types of square footage. Instead of collecting all the different various types of square footage, because it's all nuanced in how that's calculated. The GSF is the number that's the most normalized across all the institutions. So it may not be accurate related to the actual square footage that's being cleaned, because that's, like you said, ASF.
Right.
But it's the one number that we collect that it allows us to normalize that information.
So you wouldn't want to do building assignments or staffing assignments based on this.
Okay. Right.
But I think the space data is in this as well. If you back out and go to what facilities make up our institution.
Well, that's what triggered me to ask this question because SFDB deals in ASF and fluctuates versus usually your facility reports, which has both GSF and ASF and that efficiency for the building. And that usually doesn't change unless you really report it through, a different system than SFDB.
Yeah. So, yeah, and space is an interesting thing, and we've got to be very clear when we talk about space, because it depends if you're talking to a planner or an energy manager or a custodian or a president or who's asking the question. So when I said how much space do you have on campus, and the typical response is who's asking?
Right.
Yeah.
It's a loaded question.
Yeah.
For what purpose? Right.
I think the pull down menu at the top. Scroll up. There you go. Let's see if there's a. There you go. Non-assignable, or is that net assignable?
Yeah. I think it's net assignable square footage yeah, there's two NASFs we found in space acronyms, and they mean
out of the game.
They mean the opposite things. Non-assignable and net assignable, but they're both NASF. So you really have to look at the definition when it's asking for NASF. Yeah.
So you can see some people did the detailed analysis and some people did not. And I believe we may even provide this at the
we do
front end at the survey level based on Teresa's database. So we provide a full spreadsheet that Joe sends out with all of these breakdowns of how the Chancellor's office views your space allocations and where they reside. So, it really helps to normalize the numbers rather than relying on 23 different campuses to make their own determination and stuff. So wherever possible, we try to do that.
So I want to highlight one other thing on these reports that whenever we want to graph anything in a column, we can click on the graph icon, which is just to the right of the question mark. So anytime you want to take a look at a graph, you can click on that and it'll graph the information in that column. The question mark to the left is the definition of what's in that column. So you can click on that to better understand what information is being collected. So if you ever need to get down to the theory of what's being collected and how information is being calculated, I think it's way overly complicated the way they've described it here with the value distribution down below, but it at least gives you a base level definition of the information that's being calculated. And if it's a calculated field, it'll tell you how it's being calculated. So that question mark is valuable when you're doing your own analysis to best understand where that information is coming from. Any other questions from either anybody in the room or online that are specific to your campus that we might be able to answer or do a little data analysis for you? Okay, so why don't we talk a little bit more about the report settings, and we can bounce back and forth between a couple of reports and some report settings to see how things change. So Joe, if you want to jump into one of the detailed reports again. Actually, yeah, let's take a look at a detailed report. Any of them, yeah, and if you click on one of the graphs. So off to the right, we've been looking at student FTE as a...
I wanted to remove the multi-year.
Yeah, well, so obviously this is a crazy chart, right? We've got too many years. I don't want to see student FTE off to the right. So how can I change that? So let's go in and change some of the look and feel of this report. So once again, I'm going to go into my report settings. And the report settings show all my institutions that are going to be showing up in this report. And I can actually change that here on that radio button if I needed to. And here we can change our years. We've seen that happen before, so let's adjust our years. Go ahead and adjust your years there, Joe. Choose which one?
Oh, it's right here.
Yeah. Let's go down to 1 year. You click no years. There you go. All right, and go back. Return to preferences. there. And then there's another area on here on what shows up off to the right. Right now we're looking at student population. If you scroll down a little further, you're going to find, keep going down. Oh. All right, they changed the location. Let's see where that's at.
It's in the detailed section.
Is it in the yeah, it's in, okay, so let's go to the detailed report now. Just run one of those. And down at the bottom, I think it's at the very bottom, right here, yeah, enrollment range. This is where you can change what the averages you're going to be looking at. So if I want to see averages based on Carnegie class, based on funding, APPA region, so let's select APPA region because that's applicable, or all CSU, there you go. See how that works.
I don't think that's working.
We'll see if it's working. It wasn't working in beta, but we'll see if they've got it fixed. Now when we run any of these graphs, actually scroll down to one of the bottom, oh, okay, you don't have that on this one. All right, Jack, you can pick any of them, graph any of these. So off to the right, yeah, they still haven't added the CSU average, but when that radio button changing, it should add the CSU average once the beta's fixed. Let's go down and pick Carnegie class. Or APPA region, how about APPA region? Up, there you go, right there. And then graph. Now we can see how that changes the report to show APPA regions averages off to the right.
I think it's probably also a good time, we have just a few minutes left to talk about, this has all been quantitative information. And, you know, the trick really is to overlay your quality program, the qualitative results that you get with the similar fundings for other institutions and stuff. So there is, if you go back to any one of the affinity groups, the Custodio, for instance, Custodio, go to grounds maybe. Go to grounds, we haven't looked at much at that. And there's an opportunity to input your quality assessment based on APPA levels of standards. So it's really subjective at this point. There are also some areas to put in your customer satisfaction rating. Those can be less subjective if you've engaged in some level of customer satisfaction surveys or other methodologies for obtaining a actual ranking that you can transpose into your report. And that's really probably more ideal. Some people just guess at it and throw in a number that they're highly satisfied and everything. Pretty good. But it's somewhat the qualitative is harder to assess and takes a higher level of skill and understanding of your portfolio, and you really need to participate. Probably the best methodology is long-standing, consistent surveying methodologies for both your customers and your employees to assess this over time. So if you take all the qualitative information and overlay the quantitative based on some level of empirical evidence and data, you really start getting somewhere in terms of understanding how the impacts are. And this comes into play when there's influx of money into your organization or budget reductions, and you can see, and in 2008, we took a 22% budget reduction to our budget. How did that in fact affect the customer satisfaction rating over time? Some people, the campus, the first thing they do is cut out, well, we're going to stop all this expenditures in employee and customer satisfaction rating. I think our collective opinion of that is it's the worst time to cut quality programs in the midst of budget reductions and stuff. We need to see what the impact, maybe we've been making expenditures that really didn't make sense and it doesn't really impact our bottom line in terms of satisfaction at all. So we need to maintain our programs, but knowing that over time really helps. So as I say, a lot of people are not doing that because it's exactly what did happen in CSU is a lot of folks stopped measuring. So we don't really know in many cases, only on individual campus by campus basis. Some do, some don't. But there's, we're at the grounds.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, there it is at the top right. Ground service levels, just graph that.
All right.
You're gonna see most people have put a 3 in there, nice safe number. Okay, some have done, more levels of detail and some less, and most of it is just a general assessment of what they think the quality of their grounds and landscaping is here.
And there's definitions that go with these 5 APPA levels that you can select from, 1 through 5. You see some have selected their grounds to be at a level 2. Some have even selected their grounds to be at a level 4, self-reported. This is just self-reporting. So it's subjective. Quick straw poll for those campuses in the room. Are any of you participating in annual like balanced scorecard or assessment programs of student or faculty population as to how facilities is doing? So San Marcos is, nobody else is doing it? Yeah, okay. So that's where you get some feedback, more anecdotal feedback from campus population as to how they view the grounds and custodial services.
So Cal Poly and Bakersfield have also said they're participating now as well. But sometimes these numbers are selected based on a little bit more critical analysis based on your staffing levels. And there's some correlation to staffing per acres or staffing per square foot to where your APPA standard should be in terms of quality. So some folks I know have done that and say, well, based on our staffing level, we really are a 3 or we really are a 2. But knowing this in regard, when you go to battle for the budget dollars annually, perhaps, you might say, where does our campus want to be? So it's an opportunity to align the results of your activities to the vision and mission of your university president and the goals of that campus. They may elect to, they don't want to put an overemphasis on their grounds and landscaping. They think it's, or they might pride themselves, they want to be the best looking campus in the CSU system. Or they want to be the most sustainable and still look good, to look really good, and that comes at a cost. So you can't do that at staffing levels that are at 22 acres per grounds worker and have a very attractive, sustainable landscaping environment.
So Rob, I know we talked a little bit earlier about how we're calculating CRB and how we provide that to the campuses and the calculation method for that. But I know you've also been working with APPA as far as total cost of ownership. And I'm wondering if that is something, that initiative is somehow going to roll into this survey, if that's something separate, or maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yes, there's, and when we talk about facilities operating expenditures in relationship to the CRV, that's where it starts to make sense in terms of total cost of ownership, because then we're talking about investment into the portfolio, into the cost of the organization. What annual cost or investment should we be putting back into your portfolio based on the cost of the original investment or the current reinvestments? So, yeah, a lot of this stuff relates. I think this program will be modified, will be modernized. The software is going to get better, and the reports are going to get better. And hopefully we're going to normalize, continue to normalize the numbers. These numbers are a lot more normalized than they were 10, 12 years ago. I mean, we were really all over the map at that point, but we were at the baby stages of beginning to, use metrics to understand our organizations and to manage our organizations and to make decisions that are more informed and to inform our bosses so they could make more informed decisions. So yeah, total cost of ownership, when it really starts to get rolled out in a more formal manner, is going to intertwine with this information quite a bit. I think we've probably hit the end of this. So we could go offline and Be available. You know, you may not need this information today, but you probably will tomorrow. And, you know, and when you get into those binds, you get called up, you need information at the last minute. You know, sometimes we could be available at the last minute to help you, step you through and give you some ammunition to go to the board that you're entering. And, or if you're interested in more longer term perspective of how to view your organization or how this tool might work for your individual needs, we are certainly available.
Yeah, I've been asked a couple times to do that, to quickly pull together some reports for directors, and certainly available to help with that. I mean, I know you guys aren't in this every day, but and I've been in it a lot the last year, trying to learn the navigation. So we could certainly help point you in the right direction, and you know, use this as a resource for that.
I appreciate that. What I'm thinking of, Jason, is with the DFO meeting and the discussion about utilizing, you know, data and that data group that we had for a while. And I know that Shawn and the group here has done a lot of work toward helping us get this far, but I wonder if it would be a fruitful discussion topic at DFO with regard to if there was a base report that would be of use to the DFOs and even the EFOs. Which questions would we want to see summarized? That way, you guys could help us with some base level reporting. And then if there was a special need that a campus had beyond that, it could be one-to-one versus all 23 of us in some way, shape, or form asking you to help with the same type of thing. So it might be worth some discussion.
Yeah, we've done that in the past. We've done some system-wide base level reporting to have that you can just pull off the shelf and quickly get some reference without having to dive into the data. And that I think has been helpful. We did that back when APPA was less proficient at providing the graphs and charts that they do now. And since there's so many different variations on the types of reports, we got away from doing that. But I think that it's a good request that we can get back to at least providing some baseline reporting for you guys. Yeah. And you know, as we're wrapping up here, I want to throw a commercial out for the upcoming Board of Trustees meeting. So it's on the 22nd and 23rd. No, 21st and 22nd. I think it's 21st and 22nd of this month is the upcoming Board of Trustees meeting, and it's maybe something that a lot of folks don't pay attention to. Although there's a direct impact to our organization coming up in this Board of Trustees, not only our organization, but the institution as a whole, because there's a significant vote that's going to be happening related to tuition fee increases for students. And that vote will happen on Wednesday, the 22nd with the board. Has anybody ever participated in the streaming of Board of Trustees meetings? Get online and watch them. Yeah, so if you haven't done that in the past, there's a link to the Board of Trustees meetings available on the website, Board of Trustees on the CSYOU or the calstate.edu website. Both of them have links to the streaming live video for any Board of Trustees meeting. If you haven't, I encourage you to listen in. As I talked in the beginning of this meeting, we are going through some real transformational changes in CSU right now, and a lot of the structure on the way we're going to reorganize this institution is talked about in those meetings. A lot is academic focused on student initiatives and enrollment growth and graduation initiatives, things like that. But a lot of it is also finance and capital programs and deferred maintenance and operation programs, and how we fund that, how it's different today than it has been in the past. So we are facing some challenges related to state funding for our organization. Like we do every year, there's always a deficit, there's always less resources and more need, and how we are going to be crossing those hurdles is discussed in these meetings. And from the leadership, it is interesting to hear perspectives of board members. We have Gavin Newsom as one of the ex officio board members in sits in most of our Board of Trustees meetings. He's also coincidentally running for governor when Jerry Brown retires, just to get some of his perspective on higher ed education and how, if he wins that nomination, how he might change the way CSU is funded. All of that is somewhat discussed in these Board of Trustees meetings. But the one coming up is big. There will be a large contingent of student and faculty here to either support or protest the tuition fee increase. Last time we had something this significant, it got a little out of hand here at the Chancellor's office building, and we had to bring in some extra resources to quell the masses. Hopefully, and I fully expect that it will not happen again. That was some outside influences that are being mitigated this time around. But I encourage everybody to tune in and watch how that proceeding goes. If we get the tuition fee increase, it will impact the capital program, because we'll be able to move forward with the funding plan that we currently have, which is $500 million in infrastructure and deferred maintenance investment. If we don't get the tuition fee increase, there will be potentially some impact to that program. So interesting times for us all to be paying attention to what is happening in the bigger institution. Tracy?
Clarify, you said last night and thinking about it more and trying to understand how that relates to the
Yes.
Are you saying that will impact that? Because we have a full bond.
Correct.
So you're saying that would impact that future bond sale.
That's correct. So the way that works is our base level funding that CSU gets, we take a portion of that, and we go out and we now have the authority to do our own bond sale. But a portion of our baseline funding is used for debt service against that bond sale. So if we say take $10 million, that might equate to $100 million in debt that we can then collect for these programs. So if the tuition fee increase does not pass, we may not have that available base debt service dollars in our baseline funding to go out for that bond sale. So that's how the mechanism works. That's the underlying impact. They may still choose to move forward even without a tuition fee increase, but they also may not. They'll have to reassess what available funds there are and how to prioritize those moving forward. And there's a bigger picture going on if you're not paying attention to the overall federal government and how state funding is being allocated to from the federal government to states, right? So Trump is certainly changing the landscape of significant overall federal funding programs. And California is one of those states that could potentially be heavily impacted by those changes. So I won't get into the details. If you're interested in that, you can easily find that. It was a good article in the LA Times this week about those funding mechanisms and how it might impact the state of California and trickle down to CSU and trickle down to us. And so there is a greater impact than probably in the recent past to things that are happening in the federal government and how it might directly impact you as a department leader. Because there's certainly going to be a trickle-down effect to all of that when it comes to these broad funding discussions. So just a commercial, wanted to have you all pay attention to some of these bigger things that are happening that will certainly have an impact to us as an institution and potentially you as an individual and a department leader and a leader within our organization. Okay, great.
Board of Trustees is an all-day thing?
It's all day on the first day, half a day on the second day. And so typically the issues are discussed on the first day and then the voting happens on the second day. So it's a Tuesday, Wednesday this time around. So Tuesday, they do closed session, which won't be available on streaming. And then starting usually about 10 o'clock, they'll do an open session and that'll run typically the rest of the day. And they'll talk about various topics and the agendas are all posted. And so you can go and look at what the agenda is and they give rough time frames on when those points will be talked about, but it'll vary. And then the second day is typically recapping of the first day and taking the votes. But it's going to be there's going to be some heated discussion around in the finance budget, which is day 2, and you'll hear all the board members give their opinion, and it will be an interesting topic. And certainly, Lieutenant Governor Newsom will have some insight to what his thinking is, which in turn, if he becomes governor, will kind of set the stage for things to come. Well, as we wrap this up, I want to thank everybody for their participation. I hope we've given a little emphasis on the importance of data collection and the role that you guys take in providing not only the Chancellor's office, but your campus with valuable information for doing the types of analysis that are important for any leadership team to have. So it's not just punching in numbers into a spreadsheet. The impacts are real, and they're important for us as a system to continue to maintain. The quality of this program continues to improve every year, thanks to people challenging the data that we're putting in, improving the quality, making sure we understand the definitions, that we're all putting in apples to apples information, and that program over the last 12 years has gotten extremely good and very valuable. So we hope that what you learned today will allow you to take that information back, start opening these reports, looking at the information, sharing them with your teams. I think the dissemination of this information is just as critical. If you have leads in specific areas, great information for them to have. So print these reports out, or show them how to get to them online. Do your own training sessions. We're here as resources to help you analyze and understand the information. Or like Rob said, we're even willing to come out to your campuses and help do some analysis for you. Send us emails, give us calls. After this, we'll send out all of our contact information to all the participants, so you know how to get in touch with us. And just thank you for your participation in the work that you do every year. Appreciate it. Okay. All right, we'll wrap this up.
Make sure you turn these in outside. They're tagged, and if you leave the
Well, they've got trackers on them.
Yes. Okay.
Oh, geez, I thought that was a gift.
I apologize.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, let me look at the email. Get you what you need. Yeah. 300, yeah, no problem. Send it to the print shop.